They're launching missiles from the southern part of Iran, from Shiraz, from Tabriz, from the northern part of Iran. It's northwest of Iran, Tabriz, and they're hitting the targets in Jordan. So far, initial reports, it shows that a direct hit against an industrial complex in Jordan. So the other point is the United States has announced they may put the blockade back on the Strait of Hormuz, on the Persian Gulf, and Iran overnight they shipped out 10 million barrels of oil overnight, last night, immediately. And it was reported by Tanker Tracker. And this is the situation right now. Iran is attacking Jordan and American bases in the region. And it seems in the coming hours, we're going to see some sort of new confrontations, maybe the United States attacking Iran again. Elijah, go ahead and your understanding of what's going on with the so-called MOU.
Okay, thank you. So these attacks are not surprising, really, and the MOU not implemented is also not a surprise. There are new elements that happened yesterday that are important to highlight. First is the location of the target, and second, why all this is happening, because people need to understand what lies behind all this exchange of missiles and attacks. The first one comes from the Americans, who attacked for the first time the railway between Tehran and Mashhad. This attack is significant because it shows a very personal attack. It is not strategic. It is the day of the funeral when everybody was going toward Mashhad and wanted to participate to the funeral of the assassinated Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. So in a way, the view of so many people, we're talking about millions in Iran and in Iraq on different stage participating to this funeral, and Donald Trump very surprised of this view of the people supporting the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei and standing united against the Americans and the Israelis, when Donald Trump sent kind of a message also to Benjamin Netanyahu saying, well, this is not what you promised, and you spoke about that the Iranian system will fall within 3-4 days. People are fed up of this ruling system. By bombing the railway that going to Mashhad is a kind of personal attack rather than strategic attack. Secondly, the attack on the railway between Iran and China, that the supply line was attacked. And for the first time, we see the Sistan Baluchistan in the south. That is also one of the target. Shahabar harbor that is run partially by the Indian and by India, and also that serves mainly India and Pakistan and the rest of Asia. That is a new. So these things are a little bit of a point to stand and stop on, saying actually the Americans are starting to bomb civilian targets and they no longer have military targets, so they went against the civilians. And this targeting civilian infrastructure is a war crime and crime against humanity, but this is not what Donald Trump is most concerned about. Now, let's see the Iranian retaliation. Iran retaliated against U.S. assets in Kuwait and Bahrain, but also in Jordan. And this is where we move to why all this is happening. Actually, it is not only about paragraph 5 of the MOU. Paragraph 5 is very clear to the Iranian. It is interpreted completely differently by the Americans. And the paragraph 5 gives the Iranian the possibility to manage the Strait of Hormuz for 60 days and to talk to the Omani about it, which Iran is doing. But there is no mention of CENTCOM or the American intervention. Therefore, the Americans are not intervening in the Strait of Hormuz because they are included in the MOU in this particular affair. On the contrary, and here we understand why, and people need to know, it is about hegemony and control. In fact, the Strait of Hormuz is the only point Iran has as a leverage to stop the war in Iran, to stop the war in Lebanon and in the region, to release all the frozen asset, to force the Americans to pay compensation for the war, and to lift all the sanctions. Without the Strait of Hormuz, Iran can be totally ignored, as all the Americans and the Europeans did for so many decades, and then increase sanction year after year or month after month, and every new US president start with the new sanctions on Iran. So that is a leverage. And what the Americans are doing is actually they were not honest in the dialogue with the Iranians by signing the MOU. We saw Donald Trump signing the MOU in Paris, in Versailles, during a dinner with the G7 leaders. So he was signing, either he didn't know the details, but he was willingly signing it. He was not forced to sign it. Now, having signed the MOU with an objective to solve the problem with Iran is one thing, which is highly unlikely, it seems, and to only open the Strait of Hormuz and bring down the price of oil so he can refill the 400 million barrels, more or less, that he has used during this conflict in his strategic reserves, because the strategic reserves are more or less above 700 million barrels. And Donald Trump told us that they were only a few weeks away from depleting the entire reserve. And we know from leakage in the media that the Americans had from 700 plus, they had a 331 million barrel only, which means a serious problem for the US and for the rest of the world when there is no reserve oil. So what Donald Trump is doing is to bringing down the price of oil to make sure that he can compensate the millions of barrels he has used during the conflict, bring down the price, and then start again telling Iran, you cannot control the MOU. But he's not telling it just by vocally saying it. No. What happened exactly is the Iranians, according to the MOU, said, we are in control of the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to allow any ship to come in and out, not the Israelis, of course, and the Americans, but you have to come by us. This is what Iran said. And you cannot go by Omani waters because there is a place in the Strait of Hormuz that is more or less 23 miles. And the international law says that 12 miles from the shore of each country belong to the country in question, which means Oman and Iran. Each one has 12 miles under their full sovereignty, where there is a 1 mile that overlap in both sides, or half a mile, let's say, on both sides. Nevertheless, the Omani and the Iranians were talking about how to organize that. And they have agreed that instead of asking fees that Omani rejected completely, they will ask for services at the end of the 60 days, where there is already a company offering these services and being paid by all the shipping companies and ship owners for various services that they offer to the ship crossing the Strait of Hormuz. Iran and Oman agreed to share these benefits, and they would run the Strait of Hormuz in this way, but after the 60 days. Why is that? Because first, there is no trust whatsoever with the Americans, which proved that they are not in respect of the paragraph 1 of ending the war. Secondly, because the war is still ongoing, and we have seen what happened yesterday, last night, and the night before. So the war is not over. So for Iran, it doesn't want to let go of the Strait of Hormuz unless the war is over. The Americans ask all the ships to coordinate with the US Navy to cross from the Omani side. and it put pressure on Oman to say nothing. But what happened is ship owners and insurance companies are afraid, and they are kind of a coward because of their money, which they are rightly so, because they don't want to risk the price of a ship, and for the shipping company to increase the insurance, but then having to pay a large amount for any damage. So coward in a positive way, which means they don't really have the courage to go and challenge Iran because they don't have to. There is a safe passage. They can go on both sides of the Larak Iranian island, respond to the Iranian, and just cross for free for 60 days since the signature of the MOU. Therefore, the Americans could not put pressure on the ship owners and on the insurance company. So they went to the countries. They went to Oman, to Saudi Arabia, to the Emirates, and to Qatar. Qatar provided an LNG ship because gas is still very expensive in the world. It's still 70% above the normal price because gas reacts differently from oil. And Saudi Arabia and the Emiratis, they all provided each one a tanker. And they asked these tankers to cross from the Omani side without coordinating with the Iranians. So Iran did not um, claim the responsibility, but obviously they were attacked by drones while violating the call of the Iranian to abide by the rules like everybody else and crush for free. And this is where the Americans retaliated. And they retaliated because they want to remain in control of the Strait of Hormuz, and they don't want Iran to control it, which is the mentality of colonialism. That the Americans, they are self-appointed the custodian of the Strait of Hormuz, and they cannot accept that Iran will take this card away. This is why what we have seen in the last 48 hours, we're going to see it again and again, intensively superior or inferior, or the return of a few days of exchange of missiles, but not something that Donald Trump will call a war because he doesn't want to go to the Congress and ask for a permission. He would call it a special operation. He will call it defending the allies. He will call it whatever he wants, but these are going to be the exchanges between both countries unless they sit down and they review the MOU and the Americans accept this explanation, which is highly unlikely because America will never release all the Iranian money, will never give Iran back $300 billion as a compensation and lift all the sanction. Already, Article 4 has been violated, and the Americans are not releasing the frozen asset as they promised. First, they said 24 billions, then they said 12, and then they said 3, and now they are saying 6. However, they are telling the Iranian that they need to buy the soya from America, and they're putting conditions on the smaller amount they are releasing. This is where we are at today.
Yeah. Last night they attacked the Syriac area and the commercial and fishing pier in Syriac, and they killed. It was reported by IRIB, the Iranian state media, that three people were killed and 15 injured in that attack. It's the which is not something new. The United States is doing that in South America. It's not every time they're hitting these fishing boats and killing more people. But here is the other part of the new reports is that the sirens right now, as we talk, sound at Victoria base near Baghdad, the international airport in Baghdad, and the at the same time Iran is bombing the Kurds and the US base in Iraqi Kurdistan. This is part of the problem, and it was always one of the main concerns on the part of Iranians and these Kurds from the Iraqi Kurdistan going to do something there. That's why you see Iran attacking them again and again. So, do you think that is there some sort of plan, in your opinion, for some sort of invasion or incursion? from Iraq?
Of course not. They can't because first, President Erdogan of Turkey stopped this attack a long time ago when the Americans sent the weapons to the Kurds. And the Americans said, we want to change the regime in Iran. And then they said, we want the missile program, the allies, etc. And then after that, they pulled back and they said, no, we don't want that. But Donald Trump was complaining about the arms sent to the Kurds. Now, arming the Kurds in the north is very dangerous for Iraq, for Turkey, and for Syria because it tickles the idea of having a Kurdistan nation in Iran, in Iraq, in Turkey, and in Syria joining together in one state in the middle of these countries, which is something that these countries will not accept. So empowering the Kurds in north of Iran is something that the Mossad and the CIA have been doing for a very long time. However, the Iranian army has not been engaged in any battle so far. It is concentrated on these areas like Kurdistan in the northwest and Sistan Baluchistan in the southeast because they are concerned about the possibility of the Americans to do something about these groups like Saif al-Adl, Jaish al-Adl, sorry, and like the Kurds in the north to give them weapons and ask them to clash and create riots in the country, as they have done at the beginning of this year in December 2025, January 2026.
Yeah. Here is Elijah, the photo of the, let me just bring it up here. Looking at Elijah, there's some reports. I don't know if there, it says that Donald Trump may want to use the borders with Iraq, with Afghanistan, with Pakistan, or do something on the ground. These are initial reports. I don't know if that's right or not. But the other report that just came out as the another U.S. warship has been attacked in the Persian Gulf again, just moments ago. You know what is so strange to me, Elijah? Yesterday, it was said by the military advisor to the supreme leader of Iran that it wasn't all about the tankers. It was the United States trying to use the warship in the Strait of Hormuz, which was avoided somehow, forced by Iranian forces, you know, force them out of the strait. This is the way that the United States. This is one of the red lines for the Iranian side and IRGC. They said that it was part of MOU. It was all about, as you see in the MOU, it's all about commercial vessels and ships. It's nothing militarily, no military, operation in the Strait of Hormuz. But you see, the United States is using the Navy to do that.
Yes, it is clear in the paragraph 5 of the MOU that once it is signed, Iran will make arrangement using its best effort for the safe passage of commercial vessels. It is really specifically stated as commercial vessels within the 60 days. And they said, again, from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman, and vice versa. So they say the traffic of commercial vessels that is mentioned twice in paragraph 5 will start, and they will remove all the obstacles within 30 days. There are only 2 weeks so far since the signature happened. So it is the Iranian that allow only commercial vessels when the Americans are using their navy, their military vessels to cross the Strait of Hormuz in violation of the MOU. And then for the point that the Americans can attack and occupy islands, as Donald Trump always threatened. So first of all, the Americans are a very strong, powerful military country. However, occupying in one thing and sustaining the occupation is something completely different. If the Americans occupy an island, and they can easily do that with a lot of firepower, and then they send boots on the ground. how long they can remain in an area that can be bombed hundreds of kilometers away. They can't. This is why this is not a plan where the Americans can do. This is why they need proxy forces. And the only proxy forces powerful and strong enough to be organized and create something are the Kurds in the north that are not allowed due to regional pressure on Donald Trump. So this is where we are at. And yes, the Americans have no intention to honor the MOU. They even stopped the waivers on the Iranian oil yesterday. So they said that for 60 days they will allow Iran to sell its oils, and they didn't. Last night, 5 Iranian tankers left Iran full of oil because they knew the Americans can do something about that too, and they can suspend it completely, and or they can put back the blockade. But again, if Donald Trump imposes the blockade on Iran, he will impose the blockade on the rest of the world through that Strait of Hormuz, and then we are back again to square one.
Yeah. It seems that the United States is somehow expanding its attacks on, because there's new reports that of explosions in Shiraz and Kerman. Kerman is to the eastern part of Iran,
Yes.
and I think let's see what would happen. Elijah, when Donald Trump says yesterday, Access reported that they're preparing for weeks or maybe months of war. What has changed so far with the? Are they? Did they? You know, it was all about the American oil reserves. Are they prepared right now for that?
Well, look, it's from the American point of view, it's quite humiliating for the US military to see them escorting 3 tankers that they've asked Saudi Arabia, the Qatari, and the Emirati to provide tankers under their responsibility and to take them across the Strait of Hormuz. And they didn't want to do that, but they were forced to do it. Now, for Iran to go and attack these ships because they did not respond and did not abide by the agreement, the MOU, how would the US behave toward these countries who have already lost a lot of confidence in the US and are discussing and questioning the presence of US bases, military bases in the Gulf? So if the US are not capable of defending ships that they are escorting, that is too much for the Americans to digest and accept. And this is why we've seen Donald Trump furious about the attack, because that hit his ego and the hegemony of the US worldwide. Iran is challenging the US Navy and hitting these tankers. That's not something Donald Trump can digest. This is why he has reacted and will react harshly. Donald Trump wants a safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, not via the Iranians, via the Omani. He can exert pressure on the Omani, do whatever he wants, and he wants the Iranian out of the equation. Iran is not going to allow that. If Donald Trump bombs Iran every single day, Iran will not allow a safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz without being under the Iranian control. That is very clear. Donald Trump can jump on his head, but the Iranians will not let go of the only card they have to put pressure on Donald Trump to recover their money, to lift the sanctions, and to make him pay for the compensation and to stop the war in Lebanon. Without the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has no leverage.
Yeah. Looking at the way that Saudi Arabia and Qatar are behaving, Elijah, on one side you see they're communicating with Iranian, on the other hand, with Iranians. On the other hand, you see they're somehow cooperating with the United States in this trade, because those 5 tankers that were hit on Tuesday were from UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. So why are they doing this? They know what would be the result. Is that because of the pure pressure coming from Washington?
Oh,
And
yeah. Yes, the Gulf countries understood that Iran is a regional power It has survived the attack of two nuclear powers, Israel and the United States, who tried their best to defeat Iran. But Iran's victory is by holding its ground and not being defeated and not allowing the Israelis and the Americans to fulfill their objectives. That is Iran's victory. Now, that victory is very dangerous for the US hegemony in the area. If Iran is allowed to register victory on all fronts, force the Americans to lift the sanctions, and recover its assets that are frozen, and also impose the compensation for war, then the Americans are saying, well, the Iranians are more powerful than what we thought, and we cannot impose on Iran any of our objective. Therefore, Iran will be the dominant force in the region. This is not something that the Americans will do, are happy to do, and this is not something that the Arab countries are happy to do. However, if the Arab country can change this element, allowing the Americans to do it, they would be extremely happy. But if the Americans will not do it, the Arabs will not go and confront Iran. They can't. They are Iranian with 91, 92 million people, capable of withstanding attacks from Israel and the United States. And the Arabs will do nothing to Iran. They will be destroyed. At least the water, the electricity, the oil and gas structure, everything, the Iranian can destroy all of that. And this is why they will have to deal with the Iranians only because they cannot defeat them.
Elijah, a new update from the Iranian media, Mer News, it says that the attacks that were reported in Shiraz and explosions in Shiraz are false. There was no attack in Shiraz, which is significant because during the war, if you remember, during the 40 days of war, the attacks in the eastern part of Iran they have never happened. We have the basically all of the attacks were in the western part of Iran.
Yes.
And right now it's reporting that Kerman or Shiraz there's some sort of explosion. It was some sort of surprise for me. And another thing, Elijah, is the United States is trying to hit the same targets over and over. I don't know why is that happening, and because after all, when you see the government in Iran looking at what the United States is trying to do, it's not that much of pressure to put on Iranians if you attack some points, because right now in Syria they attack more than 10 times in Syria area. The same targets, by the way.
Yeah, it's something I'm very familiar with. Up to 2006, the war between the Israelis and Hezbollah in Lebanon, when the Israelis, after 1 week of bombardment, returned to the same objectives. The answer is very simple. It's because they have exhausted all the bank of objectives and they don't have any more objectives. So this is why they return to bomb exactly the same locations, or they add to that, like Donald Trump is doing now, civilian infrastructure. And during the war, he did already attack and bomb a civilian bridge under construction, which is a violation of international law. And it's a war crime for a simple reason that normally when two states are at war, one could argue that this bridge is used for military purposes. And this is where this country can get away with it. However, a bridge under construction and not used for civilian purposes, so the attacker cannot get away with it. Today, they attacked the railway and they attacked another bridge, but they can argue that these two were used to go to the location where they are making ballistic missiles, etc., and they were of double usage. So when they start attacking these civilian location, it means they have no other objectives, but now they want really to deepen the destruction in Iran. That's it. There is no strategic game.
Yeah. Here is again, Elijah, that it seems that the new attacks are going from Hormuzgan and they're attacking something in the Strait of Hormuz. But the latest report is that nothing is happening in the Strait of Hormuz, considering the passages of the uh, vessels or ships or these sort of tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. So basically, it's closed right now because of the problem that is happening because of the firing on both sides. And Elijah, when you look at the targets, it as I mentioned, there is no report since the ceasefire was announced that Iran would attack Qatar. But last night it was reported that the some of these refueling tankers that are because the United States is using many of these refueling tankers in the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf to refuel the fighter jets that are coming to hit the targets. They're coming from Qatar and Tel Aviv from Israel. That's what that was mentioned in the news last night. That was one of the main reasons for Iranian attack on Qatar. I don't know if the communication you mentioned how the United States is putting pressure on Saudi Arabia and Qatar. How is that? Do you think that as escalation is happening, is Iran going to get back to attack GCC countries
Of
altogether?
course. Yes, of course, because as the Americans are deepening the damage in Iran, the Iranians want everybody to share the damage. And Iran wants all the Gulf country to join their effort to put pressure on the Americans to stop this war. As long as this war continues, there is no stability, nobody is going to live in a stable country. The Iranians will not accept that because if the war doesn't stop in Iran, it will not stop anywhere in the Gulf country. So it will continue, of course, because the Iranians want their involvement because they are the one who brought the Americans to their homes, and they are the one who allowed America to establish military bases in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in the Emirates, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar. So they ask them to be responsible for their acts and then to question why they would keep the Americans in Iran, in the Middle East and West Asia. There is no reason because the Americans are bringing destruction. Are you happy with that? Then keep them. You're not happy with that? Find a way to kick them out.
Yeah. Another wave of Iranian ballistic missiles are, Iran just hit toward Jordan, and sirens are currently sounding in Jordan. What is, Elijah, the importance of Jordan after all of these bases in GCC countries being destroyed by Iranians? Basically, they're not using those bases, but Jordan and Israel are the main bases for the American attacks. It seems.
Because they are the main base for all the interception missile systems. They are the main base for most of the assets in Jordan and in Israel of the Americans and the Israelis. This is where they are deployed, and this is where the attack happened against Iran. And that is the reason why Iran is attacking the Jordanian bases.
Yeah. One of the American fighters just caught fire in Greece, and the footage just came out. Let me bring it up here. Yeah. I don't know what is the reason, but the footage just came out from. Let me just. Yeah. Here is. Yeah, it seems that it's not working. Yeah. I'm going to bring that up, Elijah. But Greece is so important as well. I've mentioned Jordan and Israel. They're using Greece and their bases in Greece. How, if they want to get back to the war, they're going to use Jordan, Israel, Greece, and I would assume Diego Garcia Air Base.
And
And
Cyprus and Iraq.
yeah, and Cyprus and Iraq. Iraq was under attack just before coming. Yesterday, we didn't have any sort of attack because the funeral was happening in Iraq, all of that complexity for the United States.
Yes.
And so, what is your understanding if they try to do the full attack? Are they going to use Diego Garcia again, or because of the the distance is going to be?
Well, so far the Americans show that they're not really reluctant to start again the war. This time, Donald Trump needs to ask the approval of the Congress, and he cannot conduct special operation, meaning that whenever the US consider it's time to attack Iran to put it back online according to the US understanding, so that is feasible anytime without the Congress approval. This is why going to a full out war is highly unlikely these days unless the negotiation of the MOU reaches a stalemate and where there's no way the Iranian will let go of any of the point tackled in the MOU.
Yeah, here is the footage, Elijah, of the American fighter jet F-16 caught fire in Greece, and
Yeah, good picture. Very visible.
Elijah, I think the whole case of Lebanon is because yesterday afternoon it was announced by Iranian foreign minister that without Lebanon there would be no deal with the United States before the American attack coming. It was
Yeah.
on yeah it was on Tuesday afternoon he announced that before the American attack happening. That night they hit Iranians in the southern part. But before that, Iran announced that there would be no deal without the case of Lebanon. What has
Yes.
changed? Looking at the MOU, in my opinion, there was no achievement with the MOU geopolitically. I'm not talking about economically. Economically, they could achieve something, both sides, in terms of the oil and gas energy. The United States needed that, and the price of oil dropped somehow. But geopolitically, nothing has changed as an outcome of the MOU.
Yes. Nothing has changed. And the Americans so far did not fulfill any of all the paragraphs of the MOU, including paragraph 1 regarding Lebanon and the end of the war. So there is no end of the war with Iran. Therefore, there is no end of the war in Lebanon. Israel continue bombing Lebanon, and in particular the area around Nabati in the south of Lebanon, Nabati al-Fawqa, the higher part, because of their insistence to occupy the hills of Ali Tahir. Not one hill, but several hills, because they understand there are military facilities under that area. They know only a few entrants. They don't know all the entrants. And they think they did not degrade that facility and they want it back under their control desperately.
Yeah, I talked with Laith Marouf, who is in Beirut. He said that Ali Tahir, that fortress, is so important for Hezbollah. If it takes them to send all of their forces to defend it, they're gonna send Hezbollah gonna send all of the forces because it's so important strategically for Lebanon and for Hezbollah. If they take Ali Tahir, that would be a huge loss for Hezbollah. What is your understanding of that?
I don't see it in this way because Hezbollah has changed tactic. It is no longer concerned about the geography. That was in the past. After November 2024, with Sheikh Naim Qassem as a Secretary General, the understanding of the resistance has changed. Well, actually, it has returned to the 1980s, where the resistance is not concerned about occupying a territory, freeing it from the occupier, and then being in control of it. No, the resistance doesn't want to control anything. The resistance wants to inflict damage on the enemy and make sure that the presence of the enemy is highly costly on the Israelis. And they can do that very easily with Ali Tahir. They don't need to bring more troops because the Americans and the Israelis are looking very carefully and very meticulously to anything that's happening around all the hills of Ali Tahir. It's a very strategic point, but already the Israelis have taken the buffer castle in Ashukayf, and that's also high and overlooking Ali Tahir Hills. And Hezbollah did not really maintain a position and saying you will not occupy it and then lose hundreds of men just to keep the ground. This is not the objective. The objective is allow the Israelis to reach wherever they want and just study their effective, inflict pain on them, and leave them there. On the contrary, the more expanded the Israeli forces are in the south of Lebanon, the better is, because then there would be sitting ducks for the resistance, and they will have a very variety of choices all over the south of Lebanon. So I don't think Ali Tahir is not unimportant, but it is not really essential, and Hezbollah will not defend it at the cost of keeping it and preventing Israel. Israel is a classical army with drones, with jets, and the way the Israelis are using their bombs is astonishing. I spoke to people in the south of Lebanon, for example. They discovered one member of Hezbollah in one villa in the south of Lebanon. They destroy the entire villa and they call jets. They don't call drones. Drones discover them and then they call jets really to destroy everything, to make sure, like it happened to many cases, in many cases where there were only pieces left of the militant that held this ground in the same location despite the Israeli bombing. This is why the number of Hezbollah in one location has been significantly reduced, and the defense of a position has been really altered into inflict the large damage on the enemy is much better than holding the ground in one area.
Elijah, one of our audience is asking you, did Erdogan trade Jolani and Hezbollah for F-35 yesterday?
He doesn't need to trade Giuliani because Giuliani is very happy to respond to Erdogan. But Erdogan giving away Hezbollah to Giuliani, if you want me, I can answer that. First, Erdogan doesn't have the control over Hezbollah. Second, it is in the advantage of Erdogan to show the American that he is on their side and to get the engine of the F-16 that is lacking to his Air Force and the F-35 that Joe Biden denied the delivery. However, it is also in the advantage of Erdogan to make sure that Hezbollah is not defeated. Otherwise, Benjamin Netanyahu has already set the target, saying the next target is the Sunni, the new Sunni danger, and he said specifically Turkey, Qatar, and Pakistan. So yes, Erdogan is a trader. He has traded in the past Syria and agreed with the Russian to give it away to Giuliani, to Ahmed al-Shara, Abu Muhammad al-Julani. But to give up on Hezbollah, I don't think Syria is capable of confronting Hezbollah. This kind of Syria that tried in the past, they've tasted the bullet of Hezbollah for many years in Syria, and I don't think they will go back to Lebanon and attack Hezbollah. They have supporters in Tripoli, hence the visit of the Syrian foreign minister Shibani to Tripoli to show the solidarity of the people there who are in support of Ahmed al-Shara. However, this is not enough to start a war against Hezbollah.
Yeah, but what does Donald Trump want from al-Shara? He said that he promised me to help the United States with the case of Lebanon. What does that mean for you?
He wants to stop Benjamin Netanyahu because Netanyahu is saying, I need to defeat Hezbollah and I can't stop. And Donald Trump wants to stop the war because it doesn't suit him to have Benjamin Netanyahu lying on him all the time, telling him Iran is so easy and Hezbollah I can defeat it. And he tried. He tried and he failed. He has been trying to defeat Hezbollah and to force the arm delivery of Hezbollah to the Israeli or to the Lebanese state. And now he's trying with the Lebanese state, knowing and admitting that the Lebanese army is incapable of disarming Hezbollah. So he's trying just to say, I am in Lebanon according to the request of the Lebanese president, but that doesn't mean he can disarm Hezbollah. And it doesn't mean Syria can disarm Hezbollah. Nevertheless, Donald Trump would like to have another possibility to present to Benjamin Netanyahu saying, well, you failed to disarm Hezbollah, stop your war. Now we have Lebanon on board because we have a president that is very obedient, and he was really elected as a president by us, the Americans, to bring him to power so he can normalize with Israel. Give him the chance to do it. You haven't done that for the last year and a half during the 15 months that you bombed Lebanon, and you did not allow the president who was specifically brought to power to disarm Hezbollah and to have a deal with Israel. Now give him the chance and stop interfering because of the lie Benjamin Netanyahu exerted on Donald Trump, that he felt he was taking around the merry-go-round, and a promenade of 3 days in Venezuela was actually not the same case in Iran as Benjamin Netanyahu promised him.
Elijah, do you think that in the eyes of the United States, we know how they failed to force Yemen or Ansarullah into some sort of submission when they came to power in the initial, days or months of the Trump administration? They went to the Red Sea, then they finally decided that Yemen capitulated, we're going to get out of here. But it seems that they're not following the same sort of curve when it comes to Iran. I don't know if in their mind, in the calculation of Washington, there is a military solution for what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz and against Iran. What is your understanding of their perception? How long are they going to continue this sort of tit for tat? Is that going to be beneficial in their eyes?
You see, covering the Middle East for several decades, there is no military solution for anything. The Americans have tried everywhere, in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Iraq, in Lebanon. In Lebanon, they've tried. 1958, they brought 14,000 of the Marines when President Camille Chamoun asked them to come to renew his mandate. They've tried everything. The President Frangier and Pierre Gemayel and Camille Chamoun brought the Syrian to Lebanon 1976 to fight against the Palestinians and the leftists, and they failed. The Lebanese, again, President Bashir Gemayel, the son of Pierre Gemayel, brought the Israelis in 1982, and again, the Israeli failed. So there is no military solution exactly against non-state actors like Hezbollah or like the Ansarullah, that they are in control of half of the state. There is no military solution because they have their legitimacy from the population. They have an embedded sovereignty. It is not like ISIS that occupy part of Iraq and Syria, and they've lost the support of the society, and they failed, and they were easily defeated. So a solution for Ansarullah, Donald Trump is honest when he said to Israel, I am your best friend. Vance, the vice president, when he said to the Israelis, you have the only remaining friend. Because Donald Trump, when he arrived to power, he immediately attacked Ansarullah, and he failed. After 1 month, he just left. He spent $1 trillion and say, okay, goodbye, no deal, nothing. He had enough, and he understood that he's not managing, so he left. But the Israelis have been trying also to do that with Hezbollah, and they failed. Then now they've tried with Iran, and they failed. Donald Trump saved Israel in Gaza because the whole world, the majority in the world, hate Israel for its action today in Gaza and the genocide they are committing everywhere. So Donald Trump can save Israel and say, okay, stop. You can get by peaceful mean what you failed to get by military mean. Stop your genocide, killing on camera, your soldiers posting all the genocide and crime they are committing, and I'm going to save you. He established a ceasefire that has never been respected. He did not reconstruct Gaza. The Israelis are refusing to allow the Palestinian government, a new government that is sitting in Cairo and not going to Gaza because he's not allowed to operate in Gaza. Hamas announced that they give up on running Gaza, and yet the Israelis don't want. This is what they are obtaining in time of peace, not war. They had 53% of Gaza, now they have almost 70%. So going to Iran, now again, Donald Trump is saying to the Israelis, you failed with the war. I failed with the war. It is not by waging war that we're going to submit Iran. Let's do it differently. And we will not release Iranian asset. We will not release the money for the damage. We will keep the sanction, but we do it gradually when we are more in control. So this is the situation. Military means are never a solution because they've been tried in the Middle East and they failed in Iraq. They failed in 2003. They failed. They created Al Qaeda in Mesopotamia and in the Levant, ISIS, that turned into ISIS later on. So there's no solution through military means. But if the Americans want to solve the problem with Iran, they need to sit and talk, give the Iranians their money, give them lift the sanctions that are illegal, and they destroy the well-being of the population, the civilians, and then make sure that they don't stay in an area because there is no need for them to stay in the Middle East. But they can't. This is not the mentality of colonialists.
Here is the new statement, Elijah, from IRGC Navy. And just moments ago, they issued this statement that there is no right for foreigners in this land or this in the Strait of Hormuz. The adventures of the American terrorist or said I'm American terrorist army and its interference in yeah in designating the routes of passage will not only be met with a strong response, but will also disrupt the gradual process of reopening and seriously endanger the interests of the country of the countries that benefit from the Strait of Hormuz. And this is the announcement that they're basically talking about the U.S. interference could lead to the full closure of the Strait of Hormuz if they want to continue that.
Yes, it is very clear for the Iranians. They will not let go of the Strait of Hormuz, and the Americans will not give the Strait of Hormuz to the Iranians. This is where we are at today. Whatever negotiations are going to happen, as long as the Iranians are saying to the Americans, Oman and Iran will run the Strait of Hormuz without asking for transit fees, but services like the company that is already asking it and being paid for that service in the past. Now we run it, but there are only commercial ships that can cross. I mean, Donald Trump signed this deal. He was not drugged. He did not had a gun in his head. He was sitting happily, showing everybody in the room in Versailles that he signed it. What did he sign? Or he most probably he signed it in bad faith. That is what comes out. Why now you sending your navy into Strait of Hormuz when it is clearly stating in paragraph 5 that only commercial vessel twice? In the second and the fourth line, it says commercial vessels only. And it says Iran and Oman will run it. And they have 60 days. Donald Trump did not give them 30 days of the demining area. Instead, the Americans went to clear the path for 3.5 miles from the coast of Oman and saying, right now, everybody can cross in that area and we bypass Iran. Iran's not going to accept because it doesn't have other leverage. Because without the Strait of Hormuz, Iran will be completely forgotten. and will live under sanctions, of course. And Trump will not pay a penny for the compensation.
Part of this pressure on the Omani government is what France tried to do. Macron went to Oman, and then we had a joint statement by France and the United Kingdom about sending minesweepers there. And to what are they trying to do? Is that part of the Washington plan, or they're trying to do their game?
Well, if you can't come through the wall to the door, come through the window. So there is no mention of the UK and France in the MOU. It says Iran will demine in 30 days, again in paragraph 5, and then for 60 days will not ask a passage fees. That's it. The Europeans want to come in because they want to say, okay, now there is no excuse. We have done the job. Now open the Strait of Hormuz. But then, okay, Iran will open the Strait of Hormuz, and it is open now. But all the vessels need to cross through Larak Island because we're still at war. So you see what's happening, and I hear many analysts, particularly the Americans, they evoke international laws, in particular UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea, 1982. And they say Iran doesn't have the right, according to international law, to to cherry pick who can cross, who cannot cross. The Americans wake up on international laws whenever it suits them in a particular area. But is it within international law that a UN nation recognized by the United Nations is attacked by another country without any provocation and without UN sanction? Oh no, that's another topic. We just want to talk about the Strait of Hormuz now. But you started the war for what? For the nuclear bomb? But you're saying you don't want me to have nuclear bomb. Why now everything is diverted toward the Strait of Hormuz? And the Strait of Hormuz before the war did not exist. And Iran and Iraq and Iran and the US are still at war. So you see the hypocrisy when the international law is evoked only in particular point where it is in the interest of the US, pretending that everything has been done. How? You bombed Iran yesterday and the day before yesterday and during other period in the last weeks. So the two countries have not agreed on a treaty. They have a framework. The Americans agreed on the framework. According to the framework, point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until 13, the Americans did not stop the war. The Americans did not unfraud the money. It is stated in the MOU. Did not sort out the payment for the 300 billion. The GCC are saying, we have no clue. Donald Trump said the Arabs will pay, and the Arabs saying, we don't know, nobody told us. And then the waivers should be lifted on Iranian oil. Where the Americans reinstalled the sanctions yesterday on the Iranian oil. Then we still a state of peace or war? Now suddenly you want to talk about international law in relation to the Strait of Hormuz. So you see, this is where Iran is saying, I'm sorry, there is an MOU, we abide by it, otherwise we are in a state of war without MOU, and then everything can happen.
Elijah, just a new video of defense minister of Greece came out, and he says that Nicola Dendias, he says that why did Iran attack Saudi Arabia? Why did they attack Bahrain? And here it's just
I would like
unbelievable.
to answer this question because I've heard also many analysts saying for Iran, you want to establish good relationship with the Arab while you are attacking them. That is not the question. Iran, according to the United Nations Article 3314, any country in the world has the right to attack another country that is offering itself as a platform for a foreign country to attack this country. The Arab countries said, we will not accept the Americans to attack Iran from our territory. The Americans said, General Kane said, we fought shoulder to shoulder with the Gulf countries against Iran from day one. This is the American general chief of staff. And the Arab did not deny that. Secondly, the the American bases are everywhere in the Gulf. Donald Trump said, "We are using their airports." He said that it is on Google. I'm not inventing and I don't need to analyze. He said, "We used all their airport." And he said, "We have bases in different parts of Saudi Arabia and in other places." And he made fun of Saudi Arabia. So these countries are used as a platform to attack Iran. Iran would say, "Oh, now for neighborhood, I need to respect my neighbors and not attack them." This is what the Gulf countries are asking Iran to abide by and saying this is not the way to maintain peace and have a security agreement. Well, Iran saying, please let us have a security agreement where we do not attack one another and we do not lend our territory for another force to attack us. And this is not happening. So for people who are wondering why, it's because the American forces are attacking Iran from the Gulf countries and still using them. Why there are forces in Jordan? Why there is a huge American base in Jordan that is operating against Iran? Why there were two Israeli bases discovered in Iraq and they are used against Iran? The Iraqis don't have control of their airspace. They have no sovereignty. The Americans are using Iraq as a platform, hosting the Israelis and attacking Iran from Iraq. So this is the situation in the Gulf. All the Arab countries will bomb the hell out of Iran if Iran shows a little bit of weakness. But Iran is showing unflexible and is taking the damage. Iran is not stronger than the US. But the strength of Iran is it doing everything in its power to make sure that the US and the Israeli plans fail in Iran. So the Iran do not surrender to the Israelis and to the Americans. This is all what Iran needs to do. Iran is not winning, but is not losing. It is not submitted. And this is what Iran is doing and fighting back. Now, the Americans can hit 90 missiles and they hit 90 targets. The Iranian can hit 85 missiles and hit 5 targets, which is enough. It's defending itself. It doesn't need really to destroy the enemy because it can't. It doesn't have the firepower of the Iranian enemy, but it has the power to fire back. And as long as it's firing back, it is upsetting Donald Trump. And Iran can be in control of the Strait of Hormuz and block it. And that again is upsetting Donald Trump. So, well, this is all what Iran can do, upset Donald Trump.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Elijah, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.